Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm very excited to introduce you to our special guest, Shane Foster. Shane is the co-founder and CEO of Fostering Healthy Solutions, LLC, where he cultivates healthy solutions to diversity issues through education, training, and execution. He is the author of What Hurt Didn't Hinder and is a frequent speaker before national and international corporations, conferences, collegiate national sports programs, including the National Football League and the Major League Soccer. Shane graduated from Vanderbilt University and was drafted into the NBA by the Dallas Mavericks in 2008. And really delighted to have you here with us, Shane, because I know one of your areas of expertise is on resetting corporate culture, and that's what we're going to be focused on today. And I know that this is a topic that's really important for a lot of leaders with all this kind of accelerated change happening and a lot of uncertainty. And there's, a lot of stuff going on. There's quiet quitting and all kinds of issues going on with the workforce. So culture is of utmost importance these days. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Absolutely. I'm excited about the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness, I'm just thrilled. And I want to start off by asking you a little bit about how you got into this really cool area of expertise. If you're willing to share a little of your pretty awesome story.
Absolutely. So I minored in religious studies in school and I majored in human and organizational development. And it was a great opportunity for me to be able to truly see the inner workings of business, of organizations, of large corporations, and most importantly, the impact of people on organizations and how we go about making sure that people are able to be their absolute best version of themselves, which leads to greater productivity in the workplace, which immediately and effectively impacts our bottom line. However, it was some childhood experiences that really cemented my passion for this work. Growing up in New Orleans, Louisiana, during a time when it was the murder capital of the world, and spending the first 6 years of my life living with my grandparents. My grandfather served in our country's military, and he always had two rules in our house. He said, you be respectful to adults, you be respectful to women. Anything else we can kind of talk about and come to an understanding, but those two things were always non-negotiable. And so as a result, I've embodied that in my own life. And also had an opportunity when living with my mother and a stepfather at the time to watch what we all know as domestic violence. And I saw a lot of that in my community. I saw it at home. And basketball was my escape. It was how I got away from all of the trauma and the yelling and screaming. And I was fortunate enough to play at the highest level, obviously at Vanderbilt University, and was able to play for the USA team and have many, many accolades in that space. But what basketball, my escape, allowed me to do was go to Vanderbilt University and be exposed to diversity. I literally was in class with people from all over the world and had to depend on people in ways that I hadn't had to do before. It was through those experiences that I learned, just like Maya Angelou said, we are way more alike than we are unalike. However, there are many differences, and it's those differences that really create value. We congregate and we associate based on the things that we have in common. But the value comes from the things that we have that are different. And I was able to learn that, live that, and experience that, not only at Vanderbilt, but even in my time playing professionally all over the world. And so I've lived what it feels like to celebrate diversity, to have that diversity impact my life, to impact my business, my career. And that's something that I'm very, very passionate about as it relates to helping companies to reset corporate culture from the standpoint of making sure that our mindset doesn't shy away from those things that make us uniquely who we are. Every person is different. Every business is different. And the more in which we're able to celebrate those differences, the better our outcomes are.
Thank you for sharing that. And, that precious beginning where you got to experience some contrast, right? You got to see and experience firsthand things that I imagine were very frightening for a young boy. And thankfully, you had an escape, right? A healthy escape, which, my wish is for every child to have that in a situation like that. And then you got to be exposed to diversity and to the value in differences, which goes against kind of what a lot of people feel naturally to be safe, right? Because safety means I am like you, right? You're in my tribe, so to speak, right? So I feel safe. So oftentimes when people are with others that are different than them, the body feels a little bit of resistance. So share with us a little bit more of that mindset that you were touching on.
Well, here's the thing. There are the things that we have in common. We're all a part of the human race. We all bleed the same color. We all, once you get to a certain level, particularly in leadership and experience, many of us share the same values. We all may share the same likeness in different foods and culture. Most people like music. We have different types of music that we like, but most people really do like music. We like art. We all live in a home. There are countless things that we have that we share in common. But there are so many things that are unique based on our lived experiences that allow us to bring value to the table. Our value doesn't come from the things that we have that are the same. If you like to go fishing and I like to go fishing, that's great. We can go fishing together. But the value comes when you have more experience than I do, where you know exactly where to go and look for the fish as opposed to just being out there enjoying the water, right? When you know the right tools to use that allow me to maximize my passion for fishing with your expertise on how to be successful fishing. It's those differences, that uniqueness that truly adds value. Now, to put that into a corporate sense, now we're talking about the difference between people who have lived in poverty, people who have learned through their own life experience how to ensure that we're fiscally responsible with our resources, that we're making the best decision possible about where we're investing, where we're spending resource, where we're saving money, because they didn't learn that through class or in a book. They lived that experience of having to make ends meet with very little. That's an experience that is invaluable in finance. When you have people who, based on their life experiences, have had to depend heavily on community. So when they show up, they value people in a way that is unmatched, not because they learned it, not because somebody said it was a best practice, but because it was a survival skill that they bought into, and it's a way of life. So no matter who a person is or what they bring to the table or where they're lacking, they still value that person as a full person and are able to see the value that they bring to the table. Well, guess what? That is an invaluable skill in human resource. And individuals who lack that lack the ability to connect with some because they don't value people in the same way. It's also a great skill to have when you're managing other people. And especially in a changing workplace environment where most companies are diversifying their workforce, and you have people who have the responsibility of supervising individuals who are vastly different than them. So to have the skill set to truly be able to see the value in people, regardless of whether or not you have sameness or likeness in other areas of your life, will turn into the ability to get the absolute most and best out of your team. Well, guess what? Even the acronym TEAM stands for together, everyone achieves more. Where if you're unable to tap into the power that exists within an individual solely because they didn't graduate from a school that you recognize, or because they don't like going to play golf in the afternoons, or because they wear clothing that doesn't really resonate with you, then now you're unable to get the absolute best out of your entire team. Those are skills that are so critical and important, but they come with the things that are different, not the things that are the same. Also, when it comes to employee appreciation and engagement of our workforce, if we're unable to appreciate the differences, then what companies will do is they will say, well, we're going to give everybody Starbucks gift cards for Employee Appreciation Day, not realizing that everybody in the company doesn't drink coffee. So now you've given something that is of no value to the employee, and they still feel unappreciated. These things sound so simple, but it really goes a long way when it comes to ensuring that we have the environment that is ripe for every single person to tap into their greatness. I heard one CEO say it this way: every single person on my staff is the CEO of their position. That's how you make sure that everyone brings their innovation. They bring their ideas. They bring their excitement. They own their work. That leads to greater productivity, which ultimately impacts greatly our bottom line. But in order to tap into that, you have to appreciate the differences.
So well said. And I imagine that some bells are ringing right now for our listeners and viewers because either they're like, oh my God, right? I've got some blind spots, right? Maybe I'm not appreciating the differences enough in my team, and really having more awareness of their value, and tapping into, right, leveraging that, really giving them the opportunity to be the CEOs of their own position, to co-create solutions, right, really trusting their expertise. And so maybe some of that is going on, or maybe there is a little bit more compassion for those that are different than us, than before, both of which are wonderful, right? And for the organization and for the culture. So when we say reset corporate culture, right, there's a presupposition that there is some problem, right? There's something that needs to be reset, right? Something that needs to be changed. So what are some of the issues that you most often see these days in corporations or any kind of organization, around culture that could be improved?
Well, there are a number of things that we've just been on autopilot, not because of any ill intention or ill will. We've just been operating in what allows us to scale the fastest, what allows us to be the most profitable. And in some ways, we've taken some things for granted. For example, when you hear a leader say, well, we just hire the best person for the job, what they really mean is they hire the best person based on the number of candidates that actually made it into their office. And in most cases, we're not doing the extra that it takes to engage most communities. So what happens is we cut corners. I went to Vanderbilt University, so I trust that anyone that has a degree from Vanderbilt University is going to be a great candidate for our position. That also creates the bias that if someone came from Motlow College or something that I don't resonate with, then now I don't view that as valuable as I do the person with the Vanderbilt degree. These biases take control in spaces where we've not checked them. In most cases, we do what's quick. We're in a microwave generation. So we want to be able to just go and put the job description on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or in the places that we frequent, right? And be able to access talent in that way. Well, that doesn't reach diverse communities in the same way. And so we can't take for granted that what works for some doesn't work for all. So if we're really going to have some integrity behind saying we hire the best person for the job, then we got to make sure that we have a diverse candidate pool to actually pull from. The other area where we've kind of been on autopilot is really around onboarding. So many companies are hiring people, and the loophole that we've used has been we hire people based on years of experience so that we can make assumptions that when we hire them, they're game ready. Well, guess what? You have a lot of people coming into workplace who are completely overwhelmed because we didn't set them up for success. That's our responsibility to make sure that we have the kind of environment that is conducive to them being their best self. Listen, when I got drafted by the Dallas Mavericks, the first thing we did was get into the gym and start training. You don't start games immediately. You're not thrown into the fire immediately. You got to learn their system. You got to learn the language. You got to learn your teammates, right? You got to learn the plays. You got to learn how you fit in. You got to get in conditioning so that you can make sure that you have the capacity to last long in this space. All of that is transferable into the workplace, and we have to set people up for success so that we're not having to replace them in 2 to 3 years, which is happening so much, especially with the diversity that we're hiring. So we got to bring back a level of intentionality to making sure that we're training people effectively. And I know that's a sore subject because the first thing that gets cut from everybody's budget is professional development and training. And consequently, we have people in the workplace who are not adequately trained to properly manage and effectively manage staff. You have people in the workplace who don't know what sexual harassment is, who don't know what's appropriate and inappropriate language, not because they're horrible people and unwilling to change, but because along their entire career path, no one stopped to train them because we all make the assumption that if you have X amount of years of experience, well, somebody trained you. Well, I'll ask this rhetorical question. If every company has this same mindset, who trained these people? No one. So there are so many areas that we've just been on autopilot moving without the intentionality. And so as we reset our corporate culture, it's all about removing barriers to entry so that we add some integrity to our hiring. It's all about making sure that we do discovery to find out where are our opportunities for us to be better, to be intentional, to create the environment that's conducive to the absolute best outcomes. And then making sure that the experience of every single employee, including our leadership, our leadership teams are kind of like marriages. We assume that because people stay for a long time, that they're comfortable, that everything's good, that they're happy. And it's just not true. After COVID, you're seeing all kinds of people divorcing, and you're seeing all kinds of people divorcing companies as well, because we've assumed instead of making sure we're engaged and we know. So resetting corporate culture is about bringing a level of integrity and reconnecting our heads with our heart. People over process, people over paper, so that we can get to the absolute best outcomes. Most companies don't even know what's possible if every single person in their company is operating at their peak performance levels. They've never seen that before. We assume that it's not possible because the generations before us didn't do it. And now this generation is being held accountable more than generations past. So we assume that somehow this is insurmountable, that we can't get there. Well, the truth is, if that's what you think, then life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you believe that our employees can absolutely attain being the best that they can be at our workplace, that we can prepare them to be the best that they can be, that we can make sure that every single employee knows how they're contributing to our bottom line, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship because we're intentional about their career growth, about their professional growth, about their personal growth. And so now we get to a place where this is the goal and this is the aha moment of this whole thing. Every single company now is able to say we're the employer of choice in every community. So now when we get ready to put out a job description, we don't have to guess whether or not people of color are going to apply. We know they are because we're intentional about it. We don't have to guess whether or not people who speak English as a second language are going to apply. We know they will because we're intentional about it. We don't have to guess whether or not our employees are comfortable giving us a referral back to their communities. We know they will because we're intentional about it. That's what this work is about. But you got to reset in order to get there.
And it is such important work, especially these days. with attraction, retention issues, right? People truly being engaged, right, in the work versus just being there, yes, quietly quitting, so to speak. And so, how do we create that mind shift, right? Like, how do we create that firm belief that the people in our company can absolutely attain, right? Being the very best that they could be, right? That full potential. If somebody doesn't believe that, because maybe they haven't had evidence because they've never taken the time to train and to recruit properly and right and all of that. But what if they don't yet have that evidence? What can we do to help make this easier?
There's a couple of things, and this comes back from my childhood. So my grandparents had me in church every single day when I was growing up. I didn't want to be there every day, but they thought it was important for me to be surrounded with a village, right? So I was one of those lucky kids that got to grow up with a huge village around me. But it's amazing what happens when you're able to truly care enough about people to see more in them than they see in themselves. And as leaders, we've been exposed to so much, particularly in our industries. We are the experts of our industries. And so you know what it takes to be successful in that industry. You know what it takes to move from entry level to management to leadership to C-suite. You have all of the information. What we don't typically have is a mechanism or tool by which we can transfer all of that wisdom and knowledge to the rest of our workforce. So we have to build it and be intentional about it, not just mentorship, but also sponsors. Because the difference is a mentor is someone who tells you what to do. A sponsor is someone who sells you to other people, particularly leaders. So some people need a mentor, but some people need folks who are going to be speaking their name in rooms where they aren't, who are going to be making sure that the skill sets that they bring to the table are forefront at the meeting where we're talking about who gets promoted and who doesn't, right? So we got to be intentional about making sure that those things happen. We also have to be intentional about process. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a box that we can check. We need a process. We need a strategy. So I'm going to give you really quickly 7 steps to how you go about resetting your corporate culture. The first thing is discovery. You can't know where you're going unless you know where you are. You got to make sure that we understand what are our policies, what are our procedures, what are our hiring processes, what questions are being asked, what are people's experience once they get here. How is it that everyone on my executive team got to this place? Is there equity? That means that someone else who comes in that's differently than them can get to that place with the same effort. It's not about equality, it's about equity, right? With the same effort, with the same work ethic, they can achieve similarly, right? And then we need to establish a committee. You can't do this work by yourself. HR is not the place to just dump this and say, go do it. You need a committee. That's how you infuse inclusion into your workplace. The strategic plan, which comes next, which you should have a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, is built by this committee. And it's a committee based on the different departments that you have in your organization and as much diversity as you can foster up. And then it's important to make sure that we have training. We got to dust off the books. We got to make sure our policies are being trained effectively. We got to spend more time training our managers to effectively manage our workforce. That includes giving regular feedback so that people can be the best version of themselves and making positive assumptions. And we got to make sure that as we launch the committee, that we are intentional about accountability. It doesn't matter what strategy you have if there's no accountability. If people can crack sexist jokes in the office space and get away with it, then that tears down your culture, and it doesn't matter what strategy you put forth. If people can sexually harass folks and not lose their job, then it doesn't matter what strategy you come with. You have to have a level of accountability as it relates to every single thing. So you got to have discovery. You got to have a committee. You got to make sure that you do the proper training. You got to have a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. You got to have accountability. And then you have to execute the plan that you put in place. That's how we reset corporate culture, because we can't overwhelm people. Everybody wants to do training, and training is necessary, but too much is harmful. My grandmother used to say, anything that is too much can turn from good to bad. Anything, right? So we got to be intentional and make sure the work is palatable and digestible for everybody involved.
These are such excellent steps, and I love the simplicity of them because you're absolutely right. Training in and of itself is not going to cut it, right? Especially when there are certain beliefs and, cultural habits, if you will, that have been there for some time. And, because it's something that they're going to implement maybe for a little bit, if at all, and then it's like a rubber band. It's going to go right back to where it was, especially during times of stress and overwhelm, which many of us are experiencing. So I'm curious now, as you kind of consider the work that you do with clients, are you willing to share maybe an example or two of a company that went through a reset like this, and perhaps what worked, what didn't work, so that those listening can maybe learn from that example and apply some of those principles and steps into their own organization?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll give you some examples of what not to do first, right?
Awesome.
So we had a client who reached out to us having had a bad experience. They decided that they were going to do the work internally themselves, and so they started training. And the very first training they did was around white privilege. That's not the best place for anybody to start, and as a result, it tore down trust between the workforce and leadership because they weren't ready for that level of training, right? And so you got to make sure that you start with discovery. If you don't understand who's on your staff, where they are in their journey, so that you can adequately discern what training is necessary when, then you end up doing more harm than good. You also have, especially after George Floyd, right? So after George Floyd was killed, many companies started saying, we got to do something. We want to get involved. How can we help? How can we be a part of change? And that response was good. Now, the negative response was we just started doing stuff without a strategy, without a plan. We just started doing stuff. Some people brought in a speaker. Some people had their staff to read a book and start a book club. Some people started ERGs. All of these things are not bad, but outside of a plan, they have no substance. So then when the workforce comes back and they say, okay, what's next? What are we doing? Your response as a leader is, unfortunately, I don't know, because we don't have a plan. That also tears down trust, because we're dealing with a workforce who is accustomed to leaders saying stuff and not following through. So those are a couple of things not to do. The successes happen when we start with discovery and we understand palatability. So we don't overwhelm people. We start with a baseline of training so that people understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually is. Not what's been heard in politics, not what's on social media, but really understanding that diversity is about representation. It's simple. It's who's there, it's who's not, but it's at every level, and it's considering the whole company. So as we think about diversity, it's not just about who we hire, it's also about who we do business with. It's also about who are we bringing in for vendors. It's also about who are we reaching out to when it comes to our philanthropic efforts. All of that is diversity. Who's there? Most importantly, who's not? A lot of people don't know the difference between equity and equality. Equality is everybody gets the same thing. So in terms of professional development, everybody gets access to the same development track. Well, that's equality. Equity is everyone gets what they need based on where they are. There's a difference, right? Those who are in management positions, they need a different training than those who are in entry level positions. But if everybody's just equal, we don't account for those differences, right? And then when it comes to inclusion, we all experience inclusion differently. But it's not more difficult than stopping and understanding the spaces in your own life where you feel included, where people call your name, they say your name correctly, they ask your opinion about things, they take your advice from time to time, right? That's inclusion. When you show up and you have pictures of your family in your office space, you don't have to deal with any bickering from people in the office about who's in your family and how it looks differently than people in their family, right? Because you're included. It's a place where you get to belong. And legally, our workplace should be the one place where people can go and feel safe, regardless of how they identify, regardless of what their passions are, regardless of what their religious preferences are, right? But we got to train people so that they understand that these are not just acronyms and terms that people have thrown out. They actually have living and breathing meaning within our company. And when done effectively, it benefits everybody. It's not just about protected classes, it's about everybody, because together, everyone achieves more. So with our clients that we're successful with, it's not about reaching a fast result. It's about understanding this is a journey and not a sprint. So we take our time to do our discovery and get it right. We take our time to evaluate our hiring practices, to ensure that we're tapping into every community that we have access to in this global world that we live in this hybrid world that we live in, to where we're not limited to the people who we know and go and play golf with, and the people who went to our university, and the people who are within our own networks. No, we have a global world that we can tap into to be able to access high quality talent. And we got to make sure that we're training our HR professionals and our leaders on how we define good fit. And a good fit can't solely be that they resonate with the similarities of everybody else, because, like I said before, value exists in our differences. So we got to be able to train our leaders to identify what differences are needed in order for our teams to be the most productive. What differences are needed in order for our teams to come up with the best solutions. That doesn't happen just because we tell them to do it. We got to train them to do it. And where we've been able to successfully train people, it has opened up revenue streams that they didn't even know exist, because we not only make sure that the room is filled with diversity, we're intentional about inclusion so that the people who are there feel validated, they feel heard, they feel safe to bring their ideas, to bring their solutions, to bring their very best self. And
Oh my
so we
goodness.
got to stop and ask the question, is it safe for the people at your workplace to actually be their best self?
And what a profound question, because we know, right? I imagine you're well familiar with the research on engagement, the research on the impact of psychological safety in the workplace, and how important that is, especially these days. And what we also know from research is that when people are experiencing more safety, more ease, right, they are more creative, there's more collaboration, there are less errors, there are, all of these, as you said, the example of, new revenue streams, right? There are ample results and, of course, research backing up those results. And so, what if kind of like the biggest point of resistance in a company is the leader, whether it's the leader or leaders at the very top or within kind of certain areas, but yet, there's a cost to letting them go or to taking some significant action, right? Because they have a lot of sway or they have a lot of impact on the bottom line. So, what do you do in situations like that where it's kind of difficult to take that action?
I remind leaders that it's only difficult because we allow it to be. 100, I did work in sexual harassment and violence prevention for 7 years, and 100% of the time when talking to men about sexual harassment, when it comes to their daughter, they feel drastically different than they do when it comes to the people who they're not related to. That's a belief system issue. That's a heart issue. It should be no different, because that woman that works in your office is somebody's daughter, right? And if we don't set the precedent that we are going to have a zero tolerance for people being mistreated, being harassed, we're going to have a zero tolerance for hostile working environments, then the cost is greater than letting them go, because now you have a culture that has holes in it, to where now people don't feel comfortable sharing with you the incidents that are happening. And good leaders walk around feeling like everything is good because things didn't get reported. Well, the data suggests that 1 in 5 women have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, but the data also suggests, and the EEOC bears this true, that more than 75% of the time when somebody does report a claim, that they're met with retaliation. That's a heart issue. And it's one that eats away at our culture. So we think because people have been here for a long time that everything is all good, when we don't have the kind of culture where when things happen, people feel comfortable speaking up. And we've heard from leaders from every single industry who say, I experienced it, I saw it, I witnessed it, but I didn't say anything because I didn't think they were going to do anything about it. Or because the last time that it happened, there were consequences for the person that reported it. Or they say the leaders are the ones who crack the sexist jokes, who are turning the blind eye, who are the ones sexually harassing people themselves. And if that's the person that you go and report it to, you're much less likely to report it. We're talking about issues that are the most unreported crimes in the world. So just because it doesn't come across your desk doesn't mean that it's not happening. Every single day in our country, 3 women are killed by an intimate partner. Most people haven't seen domestic violence end in a fatal murder. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. That doesn't mean that every domestic violence shelter in our country isn't full and constantly receiving calls, especially after COVID. The same is true when it comes to our workforce. And so we have to reconnect our heads with our hearts and understand that we have an obligation to ensure that the environment that we are controlling, we can't control what happens outside our 4 walls. We can't control what's happening in politics. We can't control what's happening on social media. But as leaders, you absolutely have control over the culture within your doors. And we have a responsibility to create the kind of environment that is not hostile, that people are not being threatened, that people are not being retaliated against, people are not having their views and their cultures disrespected and disregarded, because we know, not because it's just the right thing to do, but because we know that creating the kind of environment that's conducive to people being their best selves leads to better outcomes and is good business. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just the new shiny toy, the new thing to do. It's a business strategy to ensure that your company is obtaining the best possible results it possibly can.
That's right. And sustaining those results.
and
continue
sustainable.
to thrive. And that is a competitive advantage. And so I'm so grateful for you bringing this to us today because it's such an important issue. And when people also don't feel safe at work, that energy comes home. And, of course, that has an effect on their health and on their family and the community. So this is an important topic for our world. And I'm so deeply grateful that you do this work and that you share with us these simple things that we can do, right? Start small, but have a strategic process, very deliberate, right? It starts from the leaders themselves. What are my beliefs? What do I need to shift? Right. And then, of course, creating the systems, the processes, the committee, right? All of those pieces, so that whatever is created is absolutely sustainable and will shine, right, if you will, for many, many, many years to come and help everybody to grow. So thank you again, Shane, for your expertise. How can people learn more about this process that you've described, work with you? Where can they go?
You can find us online. Our website is fosteringhealthysolutions.com. You can find us on every social media platform. You can follow me directly, Shane Foster _32. We'd love an opportunity to work with you. This is really hard work for us, and it's all about making sure every company will accomplish reaching its absolute peak performance level. That's what it's about for the individuals and the companies as a whole. So please reach out. We love an opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, Shane. And I'm just so excited because as people do this work, there's just more love in our world. And what a wonderful thing that is. So, again, all the best to you. Thank you for doing this important work. And I'm really excited for people to reach out and learn more.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.